The rain battered the tin roof of the Silver Pines Diner, a greasy spoon on the outskirts of a fading Oregon lumber town. Inside, Marigold, Mari Voss, 52, wiped down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. Her auburn hair, streaked with gray, was pulled into a messy bun, and her hazel eyes carried the exhaustion of a double shift. For 20 years, she'd waited tables here, her dreams of singing tucked away like old sheet music in a drawer. Her husband, Cal, had been her biggest fan until cancer took him 2 years ago, leaving her alone in a drafty trailer with a stack of medical bills and a silence that roared. Tonight felt heavier than usual. The diner's owner, a gruff man named Hank, had announced its closure. "Town's dying," he'd said, tossing a dish rag over his shoulder. "No point keeping this relic open." Mary's heart sank. The diner wasn't just a job, it was her tether to the world. Without it, she'd be unmoored, a widow with no savings, no kids, and no plan. As she locked up, the neon open sign flickered out for the last time, and Mari whispered into the dark, "What now, Cal?" The next morning, she sat on her sagging porch, a chipped mug of coffee in hand, staring at the misty pines. Her guitar, a battered acoustic Cal had bought her decades ago, leaned against the wall inside. She hadn't touched it since his funeral, when she'd played a shaky rendition of Wildwood Flower. As his casket lowered into the ground, music had been their dream: open mic nights, local gigs, even a demo tape sent to Nashville once. But life had other plans: Cal's logging job, her diner shifts, his illness. The dream had faded, replaced by survival. A flyer fluttering on a telephone pole caught her eye: Silver Pines Talent Night, last chance to shine before the mill closes. The lumber mill, the town's lifeblood, was shutting down in a month, taking the last jobs with it. The talent night was a desperate bid to lift spirits. Hosted at the community hall, Mary's pulse quickened. She could sing a gaw, not for fame, but for herself. For Cal. But doubt gnawed at her. "You're too old, too rusty," it hissed. Still, she grabbed the guitar, her fingers trembling as she strummed a rusty G chord. The sound was raw, but it stirred something dormant in her chest. Mari spent the next week practicing in secret, her voice cracking through dust-covered melodies. She chose Landslide, Stevie Nicks' haunting ballad about time and change. It felt right, mirroring her own unraveling life. She sang in the trailer's tiny living room, the pines outside swaying like an audience. Her fingers bled from the strings, her throat ached, but she kept going. The talent night was in 7 days, and she'd be damned if she let fear stop her. The first hurdle came fast. Her neighbor, Rita, a chain-smoking cashier with a heart of gold, overheard her practicing. "You're singing again?" Rita asked, leaning over the fence. Mari nodded, sheepish. "About time," Rita said. "But you need a stage, not just this trailer. Let me help." Rita dragged her to the diner's old jukebox crew: Tommy, a mechanic with a mullet, and Lena, a bartender with a raspy laugh. They became her makeshift band: Tommy on drums, an oil can and a wrench, Lena on tambourine. They rehearsed in Tommy's garage, the noise echoing through Silver Pines. Mary's voice grew stronger, but so did her nerves. The night before the show, disaster struck. Mari lost her voice. A cold she'd ignored turned into laryngitis, reducing her to a whisper. Panic set in. She gargled salt water, sucked on lozenges, and prayed to Cal's memory. But by morning, she could barely croak. Rita stormed in with a thermos of honeyed tea and a glare. "You're not quitting," she snapped. "We'll figure this out." They reworked the set. Tommy and Lena would cover with instrumentals, Mari adding soft harmonies where she could. It wasn't what she'd planned, but it was something. Talent night arrived, the community hall packed with flannel-clad locals nursing beers and heartache. The stage was a rickety platform, the mic crackling with feedback. Mari stood backstage, her diner apron swapped for a thrift store dress, her guitar slung over her shoulder. The crowd buzzed: kids with fiddles, a barbershop quartet, a teen rapping about the mill. Then it was her turn. Next up, Marigold, Voss and the Pinewood Ramblers, the MC announced. Rita shoved her forward. "You've got this," she hissed. Mari stepped into the spotlight, her throat tight, her palms sweaty. The room hushed. She nodded to Tommy, who tapped out a beat. Lena shook the tambourine. Mari strummed the opening chords of Landslide, her voice. A fragile thread I took my love. I took it down, it wasn't perfect horse, unsteady but it was real. The crowd leaned in, drawn by the ache in her tone. Halfway through, her voice faltered. And Tommy filled the gap with a rolling drumbeat. Lena's tambourine chimed like a heartbeat. Mari pushed on, tears pricking her eyes. Singing for Cal, for Silver Pines, for herself. When the last note faded, silence hung heavy, then applause exploded. People stood, whistling, clapping. Old Mr. Grayson, the mill foreman, wiped his eyes. Mari blinked, stunned. She hadn't won the prize went to the rapping team, but she'd moved them. As she left the stage, a stranger approached a woman in a leather jacket, hair dyed electric blue. "Name's Jess," she said. "I run a bar in Portland. You ever think of gigging?" Mari laughed, incredulous. "I'm 52. Jess shrugged. "So? You've got soul. Think about it." That night, Mari sat on her porch, guitar in lap, replaying Jess's words. Portland was 2 hours away, a world apart from Silver Pines. Could she do it? Start over? The mill's closure loomed, the diner was gone. And her trailer felt like a cage. She strummed a few bars, her voice still raspy but returning. For the first time in years, she felt possibility humming beneath her skin. Jess called the next week. "Gig's yours if you want it. One night, small crowd. See where it goes." Mari hesitated, then said yes. She packed her guitar, sold half her furniture, and moved into a cramped Portland apartment with Rita's blessing. "Don't you dare come back unless it's to visit." The first gig was terrifying, 50 people in a dim bar. Her voice shaking through Landslide and a few originals she'd scribbled in Silver Pines. But they listened. They clapped. A few came back the next week. Word spread. Mari booked more gigs, bars, coffee shops, even a folk festival. She wasn't rich most nights, barely covered gas, but she was singing. At 53, she cut a demo, funded by tips and a loan from Tommy. A local radio station picked it up, calling her the songbird of Silver Pines. The name stuck. She wrote about the town, the mill, Cal's quiet strength, her own rebirth. Her songs weren't polished, but they were honest. And people heard themselves in her words. A year later, Mari stood on a small stage at the Portland Folk Fest, 500 faces gazing up. Her band, Tommy, Lena, and a new bassist, backed her as she sang a new song, Pinewood Rising, about loss and resilience. Her voice, weathered but clear, soared over the crowd. She wasn't young, wasn't a star. But she was alive more than she'd been in years. Backstage, Jess handed her a beer. "Told you," she grinned. Mari smiled, her eyes on the horizon. At 54, Marigold Voss wasn't just a diner waitress anymore. She was a voice for the forgotten. A late-blooming songbird who'd turned grief into music. Silver Pines faded behind her, but its spirit lived in every note. And as she strummed her guitar under the Oregon stars, she knew Cal was listening, proud as ever.